The bell above the cafe door jingled when I pushed it open, though I didn't feel the cold air leave the street behind me. She was already there, tucked into the corner by the window, legs crossed, her thermos beside her like a small, serious companion. I ordered my coffee without looking at the menu, my eyes flicking to her out of habit before I could stop myself. She glanced up, just for a second, and then back to whatever she was scribbling. The crease between her eyebrows didn't seem intentional, but it pulled me in anyway. I carried my cup to a nearby table, careful not to make a sound. The old wooden chair groaned under me. I noticed she had folded her napkin neatly, the corners aligned almost exactly. Tiny gestures like that stuck in my head more than they should. "You got the usual," she said without looking up. I paused mid-sip, caught off guard. Yeah?" I murmured, suddenly aware I hadn't expected anyone to remember. Her pencil hovered over the page. "I could have guessed. You always stare at the phone too long, like it might tell you a secret." She finally met my eyes, and there was something in the look that didn't feel accusatory, only attentive. I forced a small laugh, pretending not to notice the warmth in my chest. Maybe it already did. She tilted her head slightly, the corner of her mouth twitching. "You never stop, do you?" I shrugged, folding my napkin absent-mindedly. The gesture felt like a shield. I wasn't sure if she noticed. Her voice softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. "You act like you could just walk past all of this, like none of it matters." I didn't answer immediately. My hand tapped against the edge of the table, slow and hesitant. The thought of what she meant sank into me in half-measured steps, the kind that always feel heavier than they look. "You know," she whispered, leaning just a fraction closer. "Don't pretend you don't want this." The words were quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the cafe, but my stomach nodded like they'd been shouted. I looked at my cup, thinking I could pretend not to hear, but my eyes kept returning to her hands. One rested over the page, fingers curling slightly. The light caught the faint lines on her skin, and something in me ached with recognition, not sadness, not exactly, just that pull of being noticed. I cleared my throat, and the moment slipped. I should have left, maybe. But I lingered, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my thumb. A small text buzzed against my jeans pocket, ignored until it persisted. I glanced down, a message from someone else, unread, irrelevant. My chest tightened anyway, because I wanted to reply here, to her. The bell jingled again somewhere behind me. I thought about the way she smirked at my stammered joke, about how her eyes followed the edge of the counter when she thought I wasn't looking. And then, just as I stood to leave, she said it again, softer this time. "Don't pretend." I didn't know what to say. I walked past her slowly, the words repeating in my head like a pulse. My hand brushed the back of her chair, and I thought maybe she'd meant to let it happen, or maybe she hadn't. Either way, the space between us had changed. I stepped outside, the air sharp against my skin. My phone buzzed again, and I froze. Another message, this one with only 3 words, "Come back inside." I pushed the door open again, coffee slightly cold, and she looked up like she'd been expecting me. Her thermos was half empty, steam curling into the sunlight through the window. "Thought you might change your mind," she said, voice casual but not quite. I shuffled to the chair across from her. She gestured to the seat like it was no big deal, though the way her eyes lingered on me told a different story. I didn't want to seem weird," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. My words stumbled over themselves like clumsy feet. She smiled, but it wasn't entirely easy. "Weird is subjective." There was a pause. I watched her hands as she poured the last of her tea into a chipped mug. Tiny cracks in the glaze caught the light. I imagined what stories those cracks might hold, like her life in miniature. "I used to live here with my ex," she said quietly, not looking at me. "Funny how the quietest mornings feel the loneliest after divorce." Something tightened in my chest. I wanted to say something comforting, but the words dissolved into silence. So I reached across the table, picked up the spoon she'd left on the saucer, and stirred my own tea. The gesture felt almost intimate, absurdly small. I pictured what it would be like if someone else walked in now, and my stomach sank. Age, divorce, everything about her that should have made this impossible, it pressed down on me like a tide. Still, I couldn't stop noticing the way her fingers curved around the mug, how the sunlight hit her hair at just the right angle. "You're staring," she said softly, but there was no accusation in her tone, only observation. "I'm thinking," I said. It was true, though thinking about her felt dangerous, like I was teetering too close to a cliff. She chuckled lightly and reached for her pen. "You're quiet for someone who talks so much in your head." I smiled, though it didn't reach all the corners of me. "I guess I'm learning the quiet parts." We sat together after that, either of us speaking much. She arranged a few papers on the table, and I noticed the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. My eyes flicked to her hands again, the way they moved deliberately, almost hesitantly, and I wondered if she noticed how often I noticed. Then she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, not caring if I saw, and leaned back slightly. "You're too polite for your own good," she said with a smirk. "And I mean that in the best way." Her gaze caught mine, lingering longer than necessary, and I felt my pulse tighten. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in that look, something that didn't need words but carried weight heavier than any conversation. I shifted slightly in my chair, letting my hand graze the edge of hers, careful not to linger too long. She didn't pull away, and for a second, that quiet touch said more than 1,000 sentences ever could. I kept my eyes on my coffee, swirling the foam, pretending it mattered more than the pause between us. She tapped her pen lightly against the table, a rhythm that somehow synced with the quiet thrum in my chest. "You're quiet again," she said, almost teasing, but her lips twitched like she wasn't entirely sure how to finish the sentence. "I just don't want to mess this up," I admitted, voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the cafe. She leaned back, folding her arms, and I noticed a faint tension along her jawline. "Mess it up?" she asked. Not accusatory, just cautious. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to see if she'd lean in too. But my hand hovered over the table, unsure. The mug felt heavy in my grip. A sudden laugh from the next table startled us both. A friend of hers walked past, catching her eye. "Hey, Julia!" she said brightly, then turned back to me, smiling but somehow guarded. The light broke, like a curtain pulled too quickly. My pulse stuttered. She smoothed her skirt, adjusted her chair. All these little motions screamed restraint, a quiet warning. I kept my eyes on her, noting how she tucked her hair behind her ear, how the corner of her mouth twitched as if she wanted to say something but didn't. I imagined what it would be like to lean closer, to close the distance that felt electric between us. But then the barista called her name. She hesitated, glanced toward the counter, and I realized it was my chance, or maybe her way of pulling back. She stood slowly, brushing past me, a faint brush of her sleeve against my arm. That tiny touch set off something in my chest, electric, reckless, and forbidden. I opened my mouth, trying to catch her before she left, but words faltered. "Wait!" She turned just enough to meet my gaze, eyes soft but distant. "Later," she whispered. The word hung there, barely audible. My stomach twisted. I wanted more clarity, a hint that she meant it, that it wasn't just politeness or habit. I imagined her leaning in, my lips almost touching hers, the faint scent of coffee and her perfume mixing, the world narrowing to just that small space. The thought made my fingers curl around the edge of the table. But she stepped back, giving herself room, giving me room, and the moment dissolved like steam into the air. I wanted to reach again, to insist, to break the quiet rules that seemed to govern us. Instead, I sat frozen, heart thumping, replaying the nearly there moment over and over in my mind. She glanced back once more, lips curved in a near smile, eyes saying something I couldn't name, then walked toward the door, leaving the air between us thick with all the words we hadn't said. We walked along the narrow street behind the cafe, the air damp from a sudden drizzle that hadn't been in the forecast. My jacket was too thin, but I didn't want to admit it. She held her umbrella lightly, letting the edge brush my shoulder more than necessary, and I felt a pull I couldn't name. You don't usually come out here, she said, voice low, more observation than question. I just felt like I should, I muttered. My words sounded clumsy even to me. I watched her, the way she adjusted the umbrella with one hand while tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear with the other. Tiny, deliberate movements that somehow made the world narrow down to just her. She glanced at me, then away, then back again. You ever think about what you're doing? Her tone wasn't sharp. It was tentative, almost fragile. I stopped walking for a moment, unsure if I should answer. All the time, I admitted, my voice barely audible over the rain. And I don't know what to do with it. Her eyes softened, but there was a flicker of something else, maybe worry, maybe guilt. I wanted to reach for her hand, to steady the tremor I felt in myself, but I hesitated. The age gap, the silence of her life that existed long before mine, the small rules that governed our interactions, all of it pressed against me like invisible walls. You think about it too much, she said, almost a whisper. And maybe that's why it's dangerous. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about the danger, that I'd step off the edge if it meant a chance to see her smile like that again. But my voice stuck somewhere in my throat, leaving me exposed, silent. We walked again, side by side, letting the rain dampen the edges of everything else. I imagined her with someone else, someone closer to her world, someone safer. The thought twisted my stomach. I shouldn't feel like this, I said finally. My hands fidgeted in my pockets. But I do. Every time you look at me, or forget I'm even here. My words trailed off, useless, incomplete. She stopped and turned toward me, eyes catching the light of a street lamp. Do you know how reckless that is? She asked softly. Her voice trembled, though she tried to mask it. I swallowed, heart hammering. Maybe I don't care. There was a pause that felt like minutes. I wanted to lean in, to let the rain wash away the hesitation. She wanted, what? The thought hung between us, unspoken, electrifying. Her hand twitched, almost reaching for mine, then stopped. The umbrella shifted, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the rain. She tilted her head, and I thought she might say something, might ask something I wasn't ready for. And then she looked down at the wet pavement, voice almost gone. Do you really want this? The question didn't need an answer yet. We both knew the answer before it left her lips. The cafe felt emptier that morning. I slid into the usual corner, half expecting her to appear with her thermos and that faint smile. But she didn't. I waited, letting the silence stretch, letting the steam from my coffee curl into shapes I couldn't name. I checked my phone again. No message. No clue. My thumb hovered over the screen, wondering if I should text, ask if she was okay, or just wait. I didn't. When she finally appeared, it wasn't the same. Her pace was quicker, shoulders tighter, smile smaller, eyes skimming over me like she'd forgotten something important. Hey, I said, voice softer than intended. Hey, she replied, distracted. The warmth had gone, replaced by something like caution, a gentle barricade. We sat together, but everything felt measured. She stirred her tea carefully, avoiding eye contact. I wanted to reach across the table, to anchor her back to the space we'd shared, but I didn't. My hands hovered over my cup, awkward, useless. You've been busy, she said finally. Her words sounded simple, but the pause between them stretched long. Yeah, I murmured. Some stuff came up. Truthfully, she wasn't asking. She was testing. Later that day, I heard from a mutual friend something I hadn't expected. She had a child. A small detail, mentioned casually, but it landed like a weight in my chest. I hadn't known. None of the stories she told me hinted at it. My thoughts spiraled the evenings, weekends, the quiet routines we'd imagined together. I didn't know where I fit into that world. Did she even want me in it? Did she want anything at all? For the next week, I stopped going to the cafe. I didn't call, didn't text. The absence of her presence pressed on me more than any confrontation could have. I imagined her walking past the table, glancing for me, wondering where I'd gone. My chest ached with every imagined scene. And then one afternoon, I walked by her apartment building, half hoping, half afraid. Her door was ajar. I stopped, thumb hovering over the bell. Something inside me wanted to knock, to force a conversation, to untangle the hesitation between us. But I didn't. I turned, walking back down the street, the rain beginning to drizzle lightly. Later, I drafted a message I never sent. Just words on a screen, lingering in the drafts folder, unfinished. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that I found her on the small bench in the park behind her building. Evening had settled in, soft and gray, and the dampness of the grass clung to the soles of my shoes. She was alone, legs tucked under her, her umbrella closed beside her. "Hey," I said quietly, stopping a few feet away. She looked up, eyes cautious but not unkind. "Hey," she replied, voice low, almost careful. I sat beside her, leaving a small space, because leaving it too small would have been wrong. My hands rested on my knees, awkward, but somehow steady. "I saw the message," I said finally, nodding toward the draft I'd never sent. "About the child." She exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging a fraction. "I should have told you," she admitted. "I didn't know how." I wanted to reach out, but stopped. Instead, I just listened. The quiet felt heavier than words, but safer somehow. "I didn't expect you to come back," she said, voice almost lost to the evening wind. "I had to," I said. Simple, raw. "Even if it's complicated. Even if it's not what I imagined." She glanced at me, eyes flickering with something close to relief, maybe fear. "It's complicated," she echoed. "I'm not sure I should let anyone in." I nodded. "I know." My chest tightened. I wanted to say more, to promise, to explain. But it was better to show, better to just be here, waiting, risking only the space between us. Her hand twitched toward mine, then stopped. She looked down at her lap. I waited. I breathed. The silence wasn't empty. It held everything we hadn't said. "I don't want to make you regret this," she said finally. Her words were careful, soft, but edged with honesty. "You can't," I whispered. "Not if we're real about it." Something shifted, subtle and almost imperceptible. Her hand moved closer to mine. I felt the warmth before anything else. A touch, light, deliberate, and all the words we hadn't said came rushing in between the spaces of our fingers. We stayed like that, hands almost entwined, breathing in the same rhythm. Neither of us said more, because we didn't need to. Finally, she looked up, eyes meeting mine, a faint, soft smile. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I echoed. The rain had stopped, leaving the park quiet except for the faint hum of distant traffic. The world felt sharper somehow, clearer, but also more fragile. And in that fragility, we existed together, not perfect, not certain, but present. Weeks passed. The cafe corner became ours again, though never exactly the same. She still poured her tea into that chipped mug, and I still stared at the foam a second too long. The quiet ritual had settled around us, comfortable in its imperfection. Mornings started to feel lighter. I showed up at 8:47 a.m., almost like clockwork, and she would already be there, thermos steaming beside her. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. But the silence no longer weighed, it held a familiarity that felt like home. We walked through the park, hands brushing over the damp grass, the bench waiting for us like an old friend. The rain still came occasionally, and we let it soak us, laughing softly when our umbrellas tangled or slipped. I noticed the small gestures I'd always loved, the way she tucked hair behind her ear, how she folded her napkin with care, the way her eyes lingered a fraction too long when she caught me staring. She shared little things about her life, and I shared mine. Complications remained, school schedules, ex-husband routines, small responsibilities that refused to pause. But we adjusted, slid around them like two careful dancers. It wasn't perfect. It was ours. One afternoon, as the sun slanted through the cafe window, she poured black coffee for both of us, letting me take the first sip. I caught her eye. No words passed between us, but the moment carried all the weight of what we'd been through. The city hummed around us, indifferent, as we sat side by side. I thought about that near kiss, the words we hadn't spoken, the messages left unsent. None of it mattered now. Everything had led here, to a quiet balance that felt fragile but real. We sometimes returned to the park bench, a place that had witnessed hesitation, near confessions, and raw vulnerability. Sitting there, hands brushing, rain or shine, we had learned patience, not the kind that waits for fireworks, but the kind that lets warmth grow in silence. She smiled at me once, a soft, fleeting curve of lips that said more than any declaration could. I smiled back, realizing the world outside could be chaotic, but in these small, ordinary moments, it made sense. I held my cup a little longer, letting the warmth seep through my fingers. She noticed, and her eyes softened in acknowledgement. No grand gestures, no confessions shouted over rooftops, just the shared understanding that this was enough. As we stood to leave, our hands touched again briefly, a tiny anchor against the unpredictability of life. And in that small, deliberate motion, we carried all the unspoken promises that had grown between us. Later, when I closed my eyes at night, I thought of her folding the napkin perfectly, or sipping tea while the city woke up around her. Something only I would notice. Something that, after everything, made me smile quietly to myself. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?